Welcome to Students of Aging, the podcast that honors the incredible journeys and stories of seniors growing older. Tune in and become a part of our community as we redefine what it means to age gracefully and purposefully.
And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm a lesbian. I like Paul McCartney. Welcome to the Students of Aging podcast, a product of the Wood Green Community Services Senior Advisory Council and sponsored by the Government of Canada. Today, we're going to be talking about an LGBTQ issue that's very important to all of us. We're calling this podcast Separate Bedrooms. It's a little bit of a cautionary tale about what life used to be like and what we want it never to be like again. I'm thrilled to be able to greet today three people I'm very fond of. They were all stars, along with myself, of the Wood Green film, When You Find the One, which was made to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the legalization of same-sex marriage in Ontario. It was a project that was sponsored by the Ontario government. Maybe I'll let you introduce yourselves. Ron, would you like to start first?
Yes, I'm Ron Demers.
I'm Colleen Peacock.
And I'm Peter Marinelli.
And I'm Barb McCutcheon. I'm very happy to talk about this. If I just say to you, what does separate bedrooms, that term, bring to mind?
Well, to me, separate bedrooms means going back to the time when gay people had to literally have separate bedrooms in their homes. And this was so that people wouldn't know that they were actually a couple. I was fortunate by the time I met my spouse and we moved in together, we were able to have our, mutual bedroom, our own bedroom. But I know in the past, that just wasn't done.
Mm-hmm.
Charles and I, in our lifetime, owned several homes. And believe it or not, in every home, we had separate bedrooms to protect our relationship and, of course, to kind of respect family and friends. So, we thought perhaps they didn't know our situation, so we thought we were in the closet. But in reality, they probably knew better. I mean, one perfect example, we had a house in Las Vegas, and it only had 2 bedrooms. And the one bedroom was designated to Charles's mother. Her name had to be on the lease in Vegas because it was a senior retirement community just outside of the Strip. So that meant 1 bedroom for Charles and I. So to save face, we ended up having twin beds.
Peter?
Well, and on the other hand, with myself, I've never had separate bedroom. From the time I was born, probably. I was born in Italy, and I slept with my grandfather. We had no central heating. So from very early on, I've always slept with either, my parents in the same bedroom, my grandfather. When I came to Canada, I slept with the landlady's son in the same bedroom. Never in a separate bedroom, except for now. With my partner, we have to sleep in separate bedrooms for medical reasons, no other reason.
Oh, okay.
And that's been my history with the separate bedrooms.
Okay. I always remember separate bedrooms as a time period when people were, especially for work things. So if you went to a gay person's house and they were gay, they always made a big deal of showing you, and here is Bobo's bedroom, sort of thing. Of course, Bobo's bedroom didn't look like anybody really lived there, right? But they would make a big point of it. And then they would show you this beautiful master bedroom that would have all of their things in it together. But very like Colleen, by the time that I was living with a woman who ended up being my wife, we had gone past that where people were coming to the house for work events. So, and anyone else, well, who cares at that point? Like I'm very lucky to that. But I know very much like going to many people's houses where they would make this big show of, and this is my friend or my roomers or the lodger's room sort of thing. It was very like that. I'm sort of curious in terms of exploring a little bit about what it was like when you were a kid. I know in the film, When You Find the One, I talk about when I was growing up, I didn't see being gay as even an option. Like it wasn't something on my radar that I would have felt that was possible for me. So it wasn't until I was fully grown that I was doing that. So I'm curious as to how people felt about growing up gay.
Well, coming from a very staunch religious family, Roman Catholic, yeah, the concept of gay just wasn't there. I knew at a very early age I was different. I certainly wasn't the son my dad wanted, but no, I think the concept of gay really didn't hit me till maybe my high school years. That finally realized I'm not just different, I'm gay.
Peter, how about you?
Well, with me, my experience was I was also, raised as Catholic, and my family wasn't very religious, but the very thought that, I would be considered gay, it just wasn't something that I could or felt comfortable discussing. So I had to hide it from the very moment that I knew I was gay. The very moment. So there was no question about it. Nobody had to tell me. It was like innate in me that I had to hide it. Otherwise, I would suffer the consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Colleen?
Well, I grew up in a different household. There was no religion at all. I don't know if my dad identified as anything. I identified as atheist. So we didn't have the religious implications, but I think it was more of a social thing where my family, everybody needs to be straight and grow up and get married and that sort of thing. So in my teens, I started to feel a little bit like I wasn't fitting in with everybody else, which I couldn't figure out for a while. And when I finally did, I spent a lot of time trying to hide it, running around dating guys and all this sort of thing, which really wasn't comfortable for me. But by the time I was probably in my early 20s, that's when I realized that, you know what, I have to live my life and I can't live my life for everybody else. And that's when I came out.
Yeah, yeah. I found for myself when I was in high school, I think there was only one person that was openly out in high school, which I now think is terrible. And is one of those things when you look back on like why we don't want things to ever go back there again, that kids would feel that there was one person. And of course, they just tormented this poor soul, something terribly. But when I was in high school, it was the start of the feminist movement as well. Ms. Magazine was just coming out. I remember I had the copy of the first edition of the first Ms., and I was showing it around at school, and immediately it was, well, then you must be a lesbian. If you're a feminist, you've got to be a lesbian. And there was that, and it was like, oh, I don't think I'm a lesbian. Like all this sort of stuff. I like Paul McCartney. I like, all these sort of thing. Like, I don't think I'm a lesbian. I felt very much a societal push that that there was a path for me. And my path was, you go to school, you go to university, you get married.
Yeah.
And so I dated all through university and afterwards, and eventually I ended up marrying a man. And that didn't last very long. But it wasn't until I was older that I really felt, well, I have to live my life the way I want to live my life. And I always thought, well, when my mother dies, then I'll live my life. And then finally, of course, I'm thinking, I can't wait forever to live my life, sort of thing. So are there any times when you felt that you had to conceal your being gay, rather at work and what was that like? Because I think that's something that younger people don't understand. Although I just did read an article the other day about how kids now are going back in the closet, which I think is just awful, that they're coming out of university and they're rah-rah at university and whatever, and then they feel that they have to conceal their sexual orientation because they feel that it's very career limiting.
When I started to work, Charles was Karen.
All right, yeah. You told me.
Oh, wow.
For years and years and years, I was living with Karen.
Now, was Karen your girlfriend or was Karen your
Karen
friend?
was my
girlfriend.
live-in girlfriend. Yeah, of course, when I was working, never invited coworkers back to the house. Ever, ever, ever. Never socialized with coworkers.
Yeah.
That was just a given,
Yeah.
because then you'd have to answer too many questions. And they would see the two bedrooms, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So for years and years, I mean, when we finally decided to get married, I came out at work. Because I knew I had to tell my boss. And then, because I wanted to change the HR record, because I had Charles as friend under beneficiary. Now I wanted spouse. Now in those days, your boss had total access to your HR file. So I thought, for whatever reason, she may just nosy into my file and she'll see Charles' spouse. So I had to go to her and say, listen, I'm getting married, but to a man.
Yeah.
Mind you, this was Sun Life, and they were one of the very first companies in Canada that had same-sex benefits.
And I was like at Bell Canada, same sort of thing. Bell was one of they had a thing called Globe, Gays, Lesbians of Bell Employees.
Wow.
I think it was Globe. And they were one of the first companies that had same-sex, benefits. So I was lucky though, because my individual boss was not in a situation of being able to see my records. So I was able to call HR and say, I want to put Rochelle on my records. But when the time came that I was actually going to get married, I thought, well, geez, I think I'm going to, we have to be out there, right? We have to be visible, which I think is why we're all doing this today, is for that visibility. So that people watching this can realize there's nothing strange about this situation. It's there. But yeah, and she was over the moon happy for us. She came to the wedding. She was, and along with some other employees as well. And I think it was a little bit of a novelty. It was only 1 year after the law changed. Yeah. So I think that they were, and we had a very big glitzy wedding. So I think that they were all really, but
it was a novelty. A lot of people that came to our union, it's because it was one of the very first gay weddings. So they could go around to their friends and say, guess what I did this weekend?
Yeah.
I went to a gay wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that what happened with us as well is that I was told the exact same thing, like to come out at work would be very career limiting. So just don't do it. And that was by other gay people telling me this. And I even was part of a coming out group where the idea was to empower you and feel proud and the whole bunch. And they had a woman come in and she was a CEO of a big company. And she said, whatever you do, don't come out at work. And I was shocked. This was a coming out group. But it was very much don't ask, don't tell, or whatever. And so, Colleen, how about you?
Well, I remember when I first started working at Meals on Wheels on the Danforth. It was the mid-'80s at that point. And I could very easily lose my job. That was, if they knew I was gay, I could lose my job. It would just be, there's the door, goodbye. And then I would go to, pride events, that sort of thing, like we all did. Wasn't as big as it is now. It's amazing now. But, I'd see cameras from different TV studios and stuff, CTV, Global or whatever, and I would hide. Because I knew if I got caught on camera, I would lose my job, I'd be kicked out of the house.
Yeah.
My life would be ruined.
Yeah.
So, I was desperately trying to be me while trying to hide it from everybody. And the ironic thing is, we had a lot of volunteers. We were out of Eastminster United Church, a lot of church members, that sort of thing. And I remember we had our first AIDS client. And we didn't know how that was going to go because nobody had really knowingly delivered to a gay person, even let alone somebody with AIDS. And I was shocked at the volunteers, how they wanted to help this guy, how they came back, what can we do to help him, la, 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 that kind of thing. And it kind of blew my mind. And after that was when I started to feel a bit safer. I knew that these volunteers weren't going to totally cut me off.
For sure. How about you, Peter?
Oh, for me, it was a very, very a life of concealment, totally. I felt the pain before the pain came. I knew I had to hide it. But I wasn't hiding it. For example, I had men, or much older than I was, picking me up at the high school, after high school, and meeting these people, and all the calls coming into the house were from men. Before cell phones, what was I hiding?
Yeah.
And from whom?
Yeah.
So it was all in my mind, what I was hiding, but it was necessary to satisfy whatever was going on in my mind to keep this to yourself. There was fear. Yeah. There was real fear. I was bullied in public school, both here in Canada and in Italy. So that was the biggest fear. People were picking on me all the time. But in my classroom, for example, in high school, there was at least 3 guys that were gay, and even more open than I was. But that didn't bother me. I had to do what I had to do for me. I didn't care what they did, but I had to do what I had to do for me. And there was a lot of fear and anguish around it and judgment that I was afraid of. And I didn't tell my parents. I really couldn't help but tell my parents. It was just bothering me so much. I was about 16, 17. And I went to a gay club in Toronto and came back home around 3:30 in the morning. And my brother-in-law took me aside the next day. He said, "You got in at 3:30. I felt like saying, "How did you know? Where were you?" And I said, this is my salvo right here. This guy is going to help me. And I don't know where I got the courage. I could never get that courage to tell my mother. And I would pass her in the hallway hundreds of times. We would touch shoulder, and I still couldn't tell her. And I managed to find the courage with my brother-in-law. And I said, "I am gay." I told him in Italian, because he didn't speak English at that time very much. And he took me aside. He took me to his room. He didn't do it openly, which I really respect that. And he had a little cry, and he said, "Okay." And he proceeded to tell the rest of the family. And I can tell you, I was bang on about judgment. My family gave me the silent treatment for 2 years. Not because they didn't love me. Not because they didn't love me. Because they didn't understand. First thing they said, "We got to find a doctor to take you to." I said, "What doctor?" I said, "This is something the doctor can cure." I said, "The doctor will probably be gay as well." You take me. And they couldn't believe I said that. And I said, "This isn't something that you can fix." But they did love me, because after that, I moved in and out of the house. I cannot tell you how many times, trying to find myself, like, who am I? Why is this bothering me? And I am so blessed. I met all the right people. I could have easily been taken advantage of many, many times. I think I was one of those kids that I was street smart from the get-go. Right from, I was 12 and a half when I came from Italy. I was street smart already. I am very blessed up to this day. And I am still hesitant today, but no longer fearful. The fear has somehow subsided, but I'm still dealing with fear, but I'm with a 12-step program.
That's good. I think there's a lot of anxiety when you're younger. And when I'm saying younger, I'm talking about even in our 20s, because we have to think when most of us were, I can't, Colleen's a little bit younger than the rest of us, but there's no internet. There's no whatever. I remember going down to, I think, Glad Day bookstores, and you had to climb the stairs to get up to the top,
I remember that.
the second level, and you're looking around. Oh, maybe I'll look at the magazines, maybe whatever. What you really want to go, I want to go to the lesbian fiction, or I want to go to the lesbian books, right? The lesbian erotica. But you were so afraid, and you're looking around, going, "Is there anyone here I know? Is there anyone here I know?" Yeah. But the other side of it is, of course, if they saw me, I saw them, right? Because I remember at a dance seeing someone from Bell and going like the deer, and then I went, "Wait a minute, she saw me, I saw her," right? Like it shouldn't be a big deal. And the sense of community, what Peter was just saying, I think is like, we're so lucky, because I think that what ends up happening is you meet other like-minded people, and you hope that they're the ones that are going to make you feel like family, like they're your community.
See, I basically grew up in the hotel industry, and hotel industry.
Yeah.
And so I had, although I wasn't out, still there were many, many co-workers who were imagine the 70s, and they were very comfortable within their skin.
Wow.
Amazing. And I remember the one guy, obviously his gaydar went off, and he came to me, he said, "Listen, if you ever want to talk, I'm here."
Wow.
But I was way too nervous. I never
Yeah.
took him up on that at all.
Yeah. I always think of 70s as that post-pill pre-AIDS thing. Like it's like that time frame when there's like you go from sort of summer of love, 1967, to what was the start of the AIDS crisis, 81?
Yes,
Something
pretty
like
much.
that.
Yeah.
And there was that time frame in between where anything goes,
Oh,
right?
the gays were wild.
Yes. Well, and heterosexual people were wild too, right? So because the idea of, well, the worst thing you were thinking you'd possibly get is a sexually transmitted disease, and that could be
Or pregnant.
Or pregnant.
or pregnant. But you
Were
know,
worried about
post,
that, Ron?
were you worried about getting some poor woman pregnant? But post pill,
Yeah.
you know, you didn't really think about it that much, right? So,
Right.
and then all of a sudden AIDS comes along and everything snaps
I was
closed.
in high school when AIDS came along, but it was interesting. We were talking about high school. There were no openly gay people in my school at all.
Mm.
Yes,
You know, and so there was nothing for me to bounce off
no.
of, you know. I was the only one. But looking back now, we're all on Facebook, we're all on Friends, we're all older, and I can't believe how many of my classmates came out. It wasn't just me. There were so many that came out after that, but we couldn't do it at school. And it wasn't just me worrying about losing everything. I'm sure
Yeah.
they were too.
Going back to fear, I remember this guy, much older than I was. I was always drawn to older men. I think all my life I was looking for my dad
Mm.
because my dad was neither emotionally or physically available to me. So I was drawn to older men for that reason. I still think that's the reason. Anyway, this older fellow, very nice, followed me home, like all the way in the front of my house. And I said, where is this guy going? And he was on the other side of the street. I was on this side. And it was summertime. And my older sister, who's my best friend, even today, she said, that guy was after you. I was so embarrassed that she noticed. I didn't want anyone to know. But here I was in plain sight.
You were just a magnet. That's all there was to it. A magnet for
It was
older
in
men.
plain sight. I was the last one that I didn't know. I didn't want to know. I don't know for what reason. I guess it was I didn't want to be embarrassed. I didn't want to be called out. I was accepting, but I didn't want anyone to point me out. I wanted that job,
Yeah.
and I wasn't ready to do it.
Yeah.
And if anyone else did it, I objected.
Mm.
I should have thanked them.
Yeah. And there is something like, even when you're older, like when all of a sudden, like I know I always say my wife all the time, because I want to normalize it so that when people are referring, see Rochelle and I together, I don't want there to be this whole pretense of, oh, she's my roommate, she lives in the house, all this sort of stuff. I can remember back in the day, like the whole coming out experience and how difficult it was. I seem to be the person that people seem to be coming out to. And this was when I wasn't out, and I don't know why this was the case. But my stock answer was, you'd have this very obviously an embarrassed person saying to you, I have something that I have to tell you. And then they'd say, I'm gay. And I said, well, yeah, I know that, but what is it that you wanted to tell me? You know, and it always sort of disarmed the situation. But it was like, it's, of course you are. Like, I know, sort of
Well, it's
thing.
interesting. I remember my stepsister when I told her, and she just said, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's like hindsight is 2020. I look back at pictures from when I was a teenager, and oh my God, Dyke City. Let me tell you, football jerseys, the whole 9 yards. It's like, and I was in such denial. Like, I think that's a big thing for our generation and older. Like, we had to be in denial. We had to try and act straight and be straight.
You
and whatever.
fought it
You fought it with every fiber of your being.
Absolutely.
And but you can't fight nature. And at the end of the day, once you accept who you are, and I was very fortunate, I found the love of my life and was able to marry her. And unfortunately, she's passed now. But I'm so flippin' happy that I got to do that and live my life on my terms.
It's because of my spouse that we both came out.
Yeah, and it's because of people like you that got married right at the very beginning. 4 years later, we followed you.
I mean, I tell the story. We're sitting at Burger King,
I love
Gerard Square. And finally he looks at me and he says, okay, we have to put a name to this.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? And we had already been seeing each other now for a good 7 years.
Right.
But the word never came out.
Yeah.
Finally, he said, what is this? And so when we finally came out to each other, he said, and what do we do about it? So plan number one, we drag my sister to Freeport so I can come out to her in Freeport.
That's a good plan. I like that.
We got her drunk on Bahama Mamas and we came out to her.
Yeah.
I mean, and talk about not knowing, believe it or not, after all those years, she had no clue.
Wow.
But I think society was in denial too.
Oh, big
You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't have anybody in my family who's gay. Oh my God,
Mhm. I think on the employment front, I know at least 3 employers that hired me that were gay. 3, at least. And they hired me not because I was gay. I was qualified as well, but they hired me because they wanted to contribute to, whatever they were speaking directly to me.
Mm-hmm.
And just the language that they used. And I was so happy when that happened. I know of at least 3, but some of them were hiding even more than I was because they had a higher position than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to observe. I'm still working at coming out and accepting. I thought when I told my parents, I embraced that I was gay. I'm not really 100% embracing of that. And what I do now, because I'm in a 12-step program, I share that with a diverse group that is mostly not gay. And I'm saying, I'm not doing this only for me. I'm doing it for someone else that was in pain, just like I was for years. I'm doing it for them so that they can get the courage to do it one day. Both Gary and I were very kind of, should we tell our family, should we not? And he was more open to telling our family. I was less open. Because I was afraid. I had this fear of rejection, not acceptance, fear of rejection. And so we had a very quiet wedding. We got married at Metropolitan United downtown at Church and Queen. The priest was gay, so it was in a little room. We had 2 witnesses and all that, and then we just went to the restaurant for lunch. And there was very few people, and so it was very quiet. And my sister and his sister didn't know that we were married, and I was trying to hide my wedding ring. Again, the fear of rejection. It's kind of with me. It's been with me all along. But now everyone knows. We just celebrated our 11th anniversary. We
Congratulations.
invited
Yeah.
30 people. 30
Yeah.
people. So my fear is lifting.
Yeah.
And all those people, I was hiding nothing from anyone.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
All
Yeah.
those
They
people.
all knew.
Yeah,
They all knew.
exactly.
Even all my friends did.
That's
Yeah.
that's the funny thing is
Yeah.
The person I was hiding it from is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In here.
you're
Yeah.
not fooling
Nowhere else.
anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were really amazed how many people showed up.
Year
All
after
my family.
Charles and I met, he went out and bought us identical wedding bands. So I could wear mine, but he couldn't wear his.
Because he was working and because of
He was
his work.
married.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was lucky because I guess I'm a little bit younger than you guys.
Yeah.
By the time Lisa and I got married, we just wanted to have a big party, invite everybody we knew, and celebrate. And it was a fabulous day, and no hesitation, no regrets. We were just out there.
Yeah. Well, Ron's why I'm married. Because in the movie, I tell the story about how one of my good friends called and told us, this was like the day the law changed. We're getting married. We want you to be there, sort of thing. And I got off the phone and I went, my goose is cooked. Like I just knew that because having been married before, I had found that marriage really changed things, and I really didn't want to change things. I was happy, but I knew that Rochelle really wanted to get married. So the moment Charles and Ron got married, I knew there was, there went all of my ability to fight against this.
But that was the whole point. When the judges gave us that right,
Yes, yes.
we as gay people never in our lifetime ever thought we could marry. Oh, we knew we couldn't, right?
Yes.
And the fact that they gave us that right, and Charles that night said, we've got to be counted.
Yeah.
They gave us that right, we've got to back them up. Because we weren't out.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
We were not out. So now we have to invite family and friends and come out at the same time.
Wow, double whammy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, basically the first line was, okay, we're gay, we're getting married, and if you have a problem with that, we understand.
Mm.
If you don't want to attend, we understand. And we had a few people that couldn't do it, couldn't come.
Everybody came to ours.
I was going to say,
We had anybody except my dad and his wife.
yeah, I
said
think
no.
by the time that Rochelle and I got married, everyone knew, and that they were okay with it.
Yes, the St. Charles Tavern
Yes.
was one of my hangouts, although I was not a drinker. So I would stand in the front of these bars or wherever people would be coming out and would hopefully meet someone that was coming out and look at me. And because I didn't want to drink, I didn't want to spend any time there. I knew all the bars in Toronto, all the gay bars, whether they were male or female, from way, way, way back. But I don't know if any of you remember the 511 on Yonge Street.
No.
No.
That was that club that I went to where my brother-in-law asked me where I had been the next day.
Oh, when you were there till 3 o'clock in the morning.
The 511 was right across, probably diagonally across from where St. Charles was, just
Yeah.
a little bit further up on the other side.
Yeah.
And it was literally underground.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle that there were no fires. That place was packed.
Wow, I bet. I bet.
And when I saw these drag queens sing songs that I had heard before, I thought they were real females. That's how green I was.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wanted more, and I wanted more, and I wanted more. So that's how I came out of the 511. And Church Street was just starting to have a bar here and there.
Like especially for more for men than it was for women. Like I don't remember there being a lot of gay bars for women. I just wasn't a bar person either.
Yeah.
So I didn't really notice that. But when just getting back a little bit to the language and having to conceal things, I remember at work, Rochelle and I had this code for each other because I used to travel a lot when on business. And so I couldn't be going like, I love you sort of thing. So she would say to me at work, remember to give Smokey his treats. So Smokey was our gray cat. So at the end of every conversation when we'd call, and that meant I love you. And I would say something if I was at a conference and I was around other people, I'd go, oh, I just cannot remember the name of that song from that old Fred and Ginger movie. Oh yeah, Let's Knock Knees. So whenever I would say Let's Knock Knees, that meant I love you. When you think about it now, can you imagine like anyone would have been listening in on my phone call to begin with, or hers or whatever.
Stakes were high back then.
They were.
They were very
They
high
were
back
very
then.
high. You could lose your job.
You know.
I worked at a call center at Sun Life, so the calls were recorded.
That's true. Yeah.
So yes, if Charles called, if I had to call him for any reason, I mean, it was all coded.
Yeah. So I know when people think back on the good old days, there's nothing good old days about having to conceal
No.
who you are, your identity, or not being able to grow up with the options of who you truly are.
Well, remember the raids. The very next day, all the names of the found-ins published in their local newspapers. So you had people committing suicide,
Yeah.
losing their jobs, of course.
Yeah.
Or being put in the front of a newspaper.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when the bath raids occurred.
Yes.
That's what happens. So
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
get a picture, and they lose their job.
They lose everything.
Yeah.
Not long after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I find it amazing now that the young people are coming out in high school and even in public school.
Me too.
I know a young trans woman, and I've known her since she was a little baby boy, and just watching her progress into this beautiful young woman now. And, I'm just in such awe that she's able to live her life on her terms as a teenager. That was never an option for us.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see it go back to where kids have to do what we did.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how we, as being sort of older members of the rainbow community, don't always like the word queer, and yet young kids have taken it back and they're quite happy to say, oh, I'm queer, I'm part of the queer community, things like that.
You
But
know,
to us, it was a slur.
It's interesting because Lisa and I, we didn't like labels. We just wanted
Yeah.
to be Lisa and Colleen. That was
Yeah.
it. And, trying to get rid of all the labels. But now the new generation, younger generation, everything's labeled, which is not a bad thing. That's, the pendulum swinging back and forth. But, yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's changed and how people are identifying and they know who they are now.
Mhm.
And we can't go back. We can't go back.
No,
Personally, I still find that a little bit offensive.
I don't like queer either.
queer.
I don't like
I
queer.
prefer gay, but queer, it seems like it's harsh, but maybe it's meant to be harsh to draw attention.
Maybe.
That
I'm all for not labeling as much either. Like, we shouldn't have to have labels. We just shouldn't have to have
Yeah, we shouldn't
labels.
have to, but I think we do now, unfortunately, the way the world is. We need to stand proud and we need to say who we are.
But
Yeah.
having said that, this generation,
Yes.
I mean, to coin a phrase, we've come a long way. And I think now, I can speak for all four of us, we're very comfortable now in who we are. And that is quite an accomplishment considering what we had to go through.
Yeah.
And I think we have a duty to
big time.
to make sure that future generations don't have to go through what we went through.
And
Yeah.
know the history.
The history, we need to keep
Yeah.
it.
Sometimes it upsets me when you got these younger kids that life is a lot easier for them and don't appreciate what happened before. That they now have all these freedoms because of what happened years ago.
I think that is why that it's incumbent on us
Yes.
to deliver that history.
Yes.
Not to take
This-
it for granted.
To say, I'm not afraid to go into a bookstore, for fear someone will see me or what book I'm looking at. I'm not afraid to do any of those things anymore, which is why I'm so grateful for the three of you being willing to come out and do this podcast, because I think it really is important. And I think you'll find that kids will find this podcast as well. It's not just going to be seniors that will be finding this, because it really is, it's our truth. As
Not going
opposed
back
to,
in the closet, I'll tell you.
I was
that.
going to
Well, yeah.
say, we're just not going back in
We
the
fought
closet.
so hard. There's no way I would now go back into the
I
closet.
took the door off the closet. I'm done with it.
No, I mean,
Well,
But I think we do need to support our younger people at this point, and especially our
Yes.
trans community. I think they're the ones that are under the most attack.
they will be the next line of political fodder, I
Well,
think.
they
will-
are already under attack, and same-sex marriage is under attack.
Yeah.
Idaho just recently rescinded same-sex marriage, and I had a friend visiting me last week, and she knows a gay couple living in Idaho. And they don't even know if they're married right now. They don't know their status.
Yeah.
So these poor guys don't know if they're married or not at this point, and it's 2025.
Absolutely.
I had two friends that were from New York State 20 years ago, came here to get married, and here we are back in the same spot.
I can tell that we're all very committed and we're feisty older people, and we're all going to keep the stories alive, and we're going to keep fighting for our rights. I didn't think that at this stage of my life I would have to fight for
No,
these rights
no.
all over
Oh,
again.
no, I thought we were home free.
I thought so too, but I think that that's what we're going to have to do, and to encourage other people to do it as
Yeah.
well. So I hope that this podcast has been of some hope and of interest to people who are listening to it, and we really appreciate it. If you'd like to see more of these lovely people, they're all on a film called When You Find the One, and it is on the Wood Green Community Services YouTube page. So just go Wood Green Community Services When You Find the One, and you will find the film there. And we always appreciate having lots of people watch it. It was a real honor to do it, and it's an honor to come to you today. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time on Students of Aging.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing content every week. If you want to catch more of our adventures, check out the videos right here on our YouTube channel. And remember to leave a comment below. Let us know what you think or what you'd like to see next. We love hearing from you. Catch you in the next one.
On the next episode, finding Zen in a traffic jam.
Having done 22 canard cruises over the years, I think Canard was the shipping company that we used as a family to go back and forth between Scotland and Canada. So as the relatives would come, we'd go home after maybe the first year or two when we accumulated a few dollars.